President, fellow retirees and guests. They gave me a autobiography, which I assume I was supposed to read. But it is my pleasure to introduce to you today the Honorable Michael Clifton Pintard, Member of Parliament for the great constituency of Marco City, leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition, and leader of the Free National Movement. Mr. Pintard is a graduate of Tuskegee University in Alabama, where he obtained a BA in agriculture, agricultural economics. I know it's agriculture. He's done postgraduate studies in Canada and other places. He's been a sought-after speaker, not only locally, but throughout Europe, United States, Canada. He is an accomplished, published writer and poet. And certainly we are all familiar with some of his more entertaining works. Count It Again, Count It Again, which we needed in 2021. He is a former consultant with the government in various ministries responsible for economic development. And there's a host of other things that I can say about him. He's a former senator, former minister of the government with responsibility for youth, sports, and culture initially, and then agriculture and marine resources. What I would say that is not on this bio is that Mr. Pintard is probably one of the hardest working members of Parliament you will ever meet. And I say that without shame or without any reservation. He is committed to his community, committed to Marco City, committed to the island of Grand Bahama and the Bahamas from a wider perspective. And he is one of the rare politicians that we have that does not operate based upon party loyalty. He is a supporter of everybody. And I think that is one of the things that makes him unique. His ability to look above pure partisanship and to be concerned about Bahamians as a whole. Again, one of the hardest persons I know, a very determined taskmaster. My God, he can be a pain in the butt. But it is all in the interest of forwarding the Bahamas and ensuring that we become that place that we know that we can be. And before I get in trouble, I'm going to stop there and just ask you to help me welcome to the podium Mr. Michael Clifton Pintard.
Thank you very much, former Minister of Finance, former Deputy Prime Minister, and Member of Parliament for East Grand Bahama, the Honorable Peter Turnquest. I'd like to, first of all, greet all of the Rotarians who are here, especially the officers of this incredible club, and to greet my parliamentary colleague, the Member of Parliament for East Grand Bahama, Kwesi Thompson, former Minister David Thompson, and two local government officials who I see here as well. Let me begin by saying thank you to Rotary. Today, as we speak, we are distributing water throughout Grand Bahama where we can, and Rotary has played a pivotal role in providing a number of the tanks that we are using in order to assist residents. And we're also grateful to the entrepreneurs who run water depots, who we have also done business with this morning. Today is a day that several of us will be with you, and we're grateful for this opportunity. And then we'll be back on the road seeking to provide some assistance, because as you are fully aware, many persons are anxiety stricken whenever there is a system that's traveling and to the extent that it is remotely close to the Bahamas and have the possibility of changing course, residents are concerned. It is an honor to have a chance to speak a bit about the economy of Grand Bahama, and of course to look at some of the challenges and opportunities we have throughout our various communities for a few minutes, and then I look forward to a discussion that would no doubt be fruitful for all of us. I think all of us would agree that this is a critical period for the island of Grand Bahama, and we must face the tough truths about our present conditions, as well as the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for our community. We have the responsibility to revitalize the economy in Grand Bahama. And in order to do it, we have to reimagine what the overall strategic plan ought to be for the island of Grand Bahama. And when we do so, we then look at each stakeholder to determine what are their respective responsibilities. What must central government do? What must municipal government do? What must local government, what should the private sector be doing? What should licensees of the port be doing? And civil society and faith-based organization and others. And if you and I were to contemplate the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, the truth is it marked a pivotal moment that once again revealed the weaknesses that existed in our system. The weaknesses were infrastructural. Some of it had to do with the way the economy of Grand Bahama was structured. In other words, over the reliance on tourism, the moment we experience a catastrophic event that disrupts the proper functioning of that sector, or the industrials, which play a pivotal role, we then saw how vulnerable we were as a people. But in much the same way Hurricane Dorian revealed the weaknesses that exist in Grand Bahama, what is also true is that Dorian revealed to us the power of our untitled leaders. That is spontaneous action by citizens in Grand Bahama under no other direction than their desire to see us return to normalcy. We saw ordinary citizens, faith-based organizations, non-governmental agencies spring into action alongside the efforts of central government. And they were engaged in everything from rescue, evacuation. They were assisting persons in terms of getting immediate needs met, whether it was water and food and hygiene, or helping persons repair their home. They were engaged in mold remediation. And many of them continued their work when we experienced the second wave of catastrophic events in our lives over the last 7 to 8 years. They were also involved, many of them, in COVID care and provided essential services to assist residents. And so while we were dealing with the consequences of Dorian and dealing with the consequences of COVID, many of us had a chance to pause and examine what could we do differently that would help us to better prepare for climatic events, for pandemics, and then what should we do in the aftermath of these events. And so we are in that moment. We believe that unfortunately, the response of government, first in our case, post-Dorian, while we did a great deal to ensure stability of a number of the companies by providing assistance for companies so that they can keep persons employed, we also assisted many residents who had lost their job in the private sector since there were no layoffs publicly. We also assisted them in terms of providing a social safety net. But we acknowledge that there could have been greater coordination with many of the other stakeholders to ensure a smoother and more rapid return to normalcy. Government change in 2021, and I think it's safe to say that you have had sufficient time to examine our response from 2019 to 2021 in how we have dealt with persons negatively affected by Dorian, and you have seen a government that has been in place also 3 years and have had a longer period of time to make whole or to improve the conditions of persons affected by Dorian. We must say that it is unfortunate that insufficient has been done, particularly in terms of home repairs that is, we believe, central to helping persons return to a sense of normalcy. And so today, as we look at the overall economy of Grand Bahama, we have cause to be concerned, but I challenge you to keep the faith because I believe better days are ahead. The assessment from our very own Bahamas National Statistical Institute bears out the concern that many of us have. The government's own published reports show that Grand Bahama's economic production dropped to 1.53 billion in 2022, the lowest in 9 years, and only slightly rose to 1.546 billion in 2023. And so to provide context, these numbers are lower than what we reached at the height of the pandemic. Instead of experiencing a much needed economic recovery, we in Grand Bahama sadly faced yet another downturn. I want you to think about it for a moment. While other islands and economies were seeing unprecedented growth as the national economy rebounded from the pandemic, Grand Bahama saw a decline. Notwithstanding the boast by central government and the Grand Bahama Port Authority about the billions of dollars with a B in foreign direct investment in Grand Bahama, the truth is, on the ground, most residents are saying they don't feel it. And they don't see a corresponding development in infrastructure, in housing, in businesses that correspond with the boast by both central government and GBPA. And you know what is interesting? Both central government and GBPA are counting the very same developments as their own, despite the fact that many of these developments predated 2021. But we'll come to that in another presentation in a different place. But the truth is, we must confront the challenges we face head on, and not looking narrowly through the eyes of partisan politics, but what is in the best interest for residents and businesses alike. We must by now accept that we cannot continue to do the same things and expect different results. But this recognition also requires the courage and the will to make some changes in how we govern. Real meaningful collaboration between stakeholders, focus on tackling common problems and persistent structural difficulties is what I'm recommending. So for example, it is commonly said that to fly to Grand Bahama from the southern US, from the area that sends the most of our tourists, from Florida, the eastern seaboard, is more expensive on occasion in traveling to New Providence or to other destinations in the region. That's a common problem. Secondly, there is a need for us to develop world-class attractions to take advantage of the present amount of tourists that come here by cruise, the small amount that comes here as stopover visitors, and to prepare for the opening of Carnival, because it makes very little difference if you have 10 million tourists, the vast majority of whom are cruise passengers, and most of that money is not staying in the Bahamas. In other words, quite a few tourists are not getting off the ships, and those that get off the ships are not getting off the ships with their wallets or their credit cards, because they've spent it on the ships themselves or on the islands where the vessel may in fact go. And so we have a very serious problem in terms of the strategic way in which we are approaching tourism development, not just on Grand Bahama, but throughout the Bahamas, where cruise passengers dominate the number of persons who come, but the spend is dramatically different between stopover and cruise passengers. And so not to belabor this, I'd only say this, that cruise passengers spend somewhere in the vicinity of $200 or less. Stopover visitors spend in the vicinity of $2,000. And what we have seen over the last 2 decades, and particularly the last decade, is that in Florida, that sends us the most of our visitors, we have had virtually no growth to minimal growth of stopover visitors. They have seemingly converted into cruise passengers because there's been a corresponding increase in cruise passengers coming in. That is a structural problem in how we are organizing tourism, and it does affect whether there's money in your cash registers and in your pocket. In addition, we must explode something that the former Minister of Finance, who's with us today, talked about a great deal, the importance of eco and heritage tourism. And so those of you who represent, as in the case of Kwesi Thompson, the eastern portion of the island, and those who represent the western portion of the island, there is a bonanza to be had if we are able to develop the requisite infrastructure and ecosystem for ecotourism and heritage tourism. The bottom line is people have money to spend. They will spend it if what we have is compelling enough to attract them. Attract them as a destination, meaning they are planning around coming to see it, or as a tiebreaker when they are contemplating two destinations and they look at what might sway them in one direction. I think we have the capacity to do that. In addition, we should look to the orange economy, the range of opportunities in entertainment, in new media, and entertainment is both sports as well as the creative arts. Grand Bahama is ideal for setting up sound stage and studios to create movies. We're not talking about movies for blockbuster films. We're talking about movies for small stage. What we have now is a multiplicity of Netflix, HBO, that is streaming platforms that are looking for content. And we started some work prior to being kicked out of office, looking at how we can attract Hallmark, that happens to love our own Rick Fox, and attracting Netflix, that again have reached out, and Bahamians who have courted them, they've reached out to them indicating interest in their storytelling. And so again, there are a number of opportunities for us to fix some of the common problems we have, which is unemployment. The Bahamas in general, our economy is growing somewhere, on a good day, somewhere around 2%. Maybe we would hit 2.5%, but we do know that today the forecast by this government's own number pegged economic growth for this year as being somewhere around 1.1%. And international rating agencies look at it somewhere around 1.8%. So we're talking about again a low growth rate, which means that in terms of unemployment, we are unable to absorb many of the persons who are presently unemployed, or absorb those that are coming out of school and not going off to school, etc. And so there's some structural problems that all stakeholders in Grand Bahama should put our collective minds together and figure out, how do we solve these issues? How do we solve the issue of energy, of unemployment, and some of the other challenges? And so we must decide in Grand Bahama and in the Bahamas at large that our commitment to good governance will trump our commitment to narrow politics. And that is important. Probably the most influential stakeholder to many of you in the room would be the Grand Bahama Port Authority. Some would argue it's central government. But whichever of those you believe is the most important stakeholder, one thing is true, that if these two juggernauts in Grand Bahama are not working in tandem, the prospect for orderly economic development is slim to none. Many of you would recall that when the shareholder families were at war with each other, it affected investor confidence in Grand Bahama, and it was devastating to the economy. So one can only imagine now, when the shareholder families are in conflict with central government, how much more so that is likely to erode the confidence of potential investors and those who are considering investing more of their millions in Grand Bahama. And we have a few of those powerful investors in the room with us today. I think I saw Brian, I believe. And so again, it is important that we are awfully careful how conflicts within major companies or sectors, or between major stakeholders, we have to be awfully careful on how that plays out on the island, and by extension in the global community, that's looking to the Bahamas as a place where it wishes to invest. And so, again, the central government has its role to play. You in this room have to make a determination in lending your voice to the chorus of voices that help to define what that role is. We believe that it is important for us to have a one-stop shop in doing business in Grand Bahama. That those who wish to invest here can, in fact, apply, and when they apply in Grand Bahama, if they get an approval, they ought to be able to establish their businesses. The present system as we have it is applications are made in a number of areas by foreign direct investors or by Bahamians who have a strategic partner from overseas. Those applications then often go to cabinet, and sometimes they move quickly and oftentimes they move slowly, and sometimes they are dead on arrival. Yeah. We have a challenge, and we ought to figure out how we will resolve this. I believe that the members of parliament from the Free National Movement are clear on this. We believe that we ought to create a one-stop shop where applications are made here in Grand Bahama, and we are able to approve substantial projects. Now, you would ask, what would be some of the things that could potentially be a deal breaker on some of those applications that central government ought to keep a close eye on? Well, one of those things are environmental considerations, because you cannot partition the environment. It is continuous from north to south. One of the ways the central government and the Grand Bahama Port Authority can solve this issue is for central government to simply pass the bylaws that we've been working on now for multiple administrations. And the bylaws will then empower GBPA, and we believe there should be a reconfigured GPA, which I'll come to in a moment. But GBPA then is in a position to deal with the issue of pollution, with noise, smell, nuisance, with the tremendous amount of dilapidated buildings throughout Freeport in particular, which sucks the energy out of so many persons who are minded to invest in this economy. And so, again, what you will then have with the passing of the bylaws is you would actually have synergy between what is expected by central government and what is permissible here in Grand Bahama. And the way you guard against self-dealing or conflict of interest, that is a GBPA not doing its job, is that the government through an auditing system can simply audit those decisions. Take a look at some of the decisions that they're making to make sure it's consistent with what the environmental laws are of the Bahamas. That will not hold up the project. We could be off to the races. Far too many projects in the Bahamas are held up that can be given a provisional approval as persons pass their initial environmental impact assessment. The second thing you would ask, what could give pause on a particular project? Well, the immigration requirements. Well, the government clearly defines what its immigration policy is, and the expectation would be that whenever an application is submitted, simultaneously an application is made around the requirements for immigration. We know that if you're coming in with a big project and your ratio of foreign to Bahamian workers does not meet our criteria of 80% Bahamians and 20% foreigners, well then that project you need not submit at that time. Work that out and then get back to us. However, we must also admit that we are too slow, too compromised as a country as it relates to immigration. And therefore, we should give consideration to putting in place more sunset clauses in application process. If something should ordinarily take 2 weeks, then you have a 14-day sunset clause. In the event somebody applies for that particular thing and have not gotten an answer to say yay or nay, or here's additional information required, we should consider the application approved. And we need to do that in more sectors of our national economy. We cannot compete globally if we remain slow and lethargic in addressing monies that wish to be invested here that can easily be in Turks and Caicos, in Cayman Island, or some other jurisdictions. We cannot afford to continue to lose investment because of a lethargic system. Or policymakers playing politics with gerrymandering. No, that's another thing that's on my mind. Cherry picking which projects they will approve or not approve for whatever reason. And so, again, it is important for us to address these critical issues if we are to have increased foreign direct investment, or for the Smiths of this world to feel free that their investment today is going to pay dividends tomorrow. I mentioned for a moment the reconfigured GBPA. If our communities are to benefit more and the island is to take off in a more dramatic way, we can no longer live with the present configuration of the Grand Bahama Port Authority. We have outlived this. This generation of Bahamians are more than capable of managing the municipal government, and therefore it is our view that we ought to broaden the shareholders in GBPA as a first step. Meaning, licensees of GBPA ought to be shareholders in GBPA. Ordinary residents that are minded to be shareholders ought to, and we ought to create, the government can have shares and a role to play there. However, the present configuration where two families own the shares in GBPA, that ship has sailed. What we must not do is to address it in the manner that the present government is doing it. It can destabilize, in our view, again, the investment strategy for Grand Bahama. It will undermine, and it is undermining, investor confidence. I said as a first step, only because the second step is one that I believe the families agree with as well. One of the things that the present government, in its previous iterations did, is permitted all of the vast majority of the revenue-generating assets that came under GBPA to be privatized. And so the light company was privatized. Not under us, but others. The companies that were engaged in sanitation services was privatized. The water company is privatized, though the same shareholders kept the shares. So even if a government is successful in taking over GBPA, it has no revenue-generating entities from which to extract the money it says it owns. So I believe, in all fairness, those companies, and this is unrelated to the government action, because again, all that is happening is you're going to have a suit and countersuit, which is not good for the economy. We believe that it would be a wonderful thing for public offerings to be issued by the water company, GB Utility, by the power company. It would be a wonderful thing to broaden for the Grand Bahama Development Company that has in its inventory in excess of 50,000 acres, to broaden the shareholders who can come in with additional resources to stimulate economic development in Grand Bahama. It would be a significant step forward. Outside of that consideration, especially in the case of DevCo, it opens up the question on what basis should present and future central governments be quiet on the issue on whether or not persons with large tracts of undeveloped land should be left unchallenged. In other words, there has to be a more rapid rate of sale or development where there is large tracts of land that are lying fallow. That is a real discussion that we must, as stakeholders in Grand Bahama, have an active discussion on. I would not like to see a real property tax in Grand Bahama, but in the absence of more rapid development of the lands held by a select group of people, it is a question that's on the table and will become even louder. Again, we have an opportunity to do some special things in Grand Bahama. I mentioned earlier that GBPA is one of the most, if not the most influential stakeholders in Freeport. They happen to also be one of the groups purporting to be the regulator for the power company. And this has a direct impact on our community. All of us are here, both residential and business persons. Prior to the amendment of the Electricity Act, GBPA was clearly spelled out as the regulator for the power company. Since the amendment, again, ERCA has once again asserted that it is the regulator. That's not a matter that I intend to discuss today, only to say that it is a matter that has to be sought out in the court. And we challenge both the Grand Bahama Power Company, as we have, And ERCA, as we have, members Thompson, Lewis, and myself met with the power company, with GBPA, and with ERCA. We believe that they should take out an action, and the court should move with a sense of urgency to settle the issue on who the regulator is. That level of uncertainty is creating a problem. We are happy that the regulator has listened to your voices, to our voices, as we've said to them, that they should not consider this application at this time, at a time where there is inconsistent service in electricity, at a time where those of you that have had damages to appliance and equipment have not yet had your matters settled, at a time when companies that have the wherewithal are in fact lowering the cost of electricity. We have in BPL and in GBPC folks asking for an increase. And what we're saying is, before we can have a realistic discussion even about an increase, what about a reduction, improving your systems, internal, improving the technology, increasing renewables on your dime, not ours, in order to lower the cost of electricity, because it's already too high. I think there's a song by OT Genesis saying you need to cut it. They need to cut the electricity rate. And so what we are saying in essence is that GBPA has in part listened and have suspended their review of the application, which buys residents and the community and businesses more time. But we're saying they should have gone further and flat out refuse to increase the rate, to say we reject this out of hand, given the challenges on this island and given your present level of service, which in large measure may be a result of your own maintenance program at the power company, your own internal decisions that have not added value to what you are doing. And so we ask once again that GBPA, again, to the extent that it believes that it is the regulator, to be more forthright in indicating its unwillingness, even when the review, their decision to once again look at the review comes up, that they will not support a rate increase. 6% is entirely too high a consideration, and so is 5%, and 4, and 3, and 2, and 1. And so we say, let's move on from that. But to the extent that any regulator seeks to look at this issue again, we have a number of recommendations for them. We need you to implement stiffer penalties for poor service.
Right.
Because when the restaurant, and we have good food here at this restaurant, when the restaurant does not have power, and in many cases when the generators do not kick in, they can't make money.
Right.
How do we calculate the loss to this business? Particularly if there's a competitor that has a generator. And people say, well, you know, in light of what happened last time, maybe we should go there. How do you calculate that? Sometimes employees aren't able to get to work if they can't iron the wrinkles out. So the bottom line is we need stiffer penalties. And to date, we have not gotten a transparent explanation from the purported regulator in Grand Bahama as to what penalties have been assigned, because we know there should have been some. To the power company's credit, they have acknowledged that there has been sanction and penalties. Secondly, that we ought to mandate the establishment of a suitably qualified technical team that's a part of any agency that emerges as the regulator. So whether it's GBPA or ERCA, they should have technically sound persons, not who they occasionally reach out to, but who on an ongoing basis can evaluate what is being done behind the scenes at the power company to determine if some of what they are claiming is adding to their cost is our responsibility as a part of the cost of service, or is it a part of their responsibility? Failure to have maintenance in a timely manner, or making the right choices in terms of which companies they are sourcing equipment from. And so again, we need a technical staff. Thirdly, we should ensure that there is no political interference. We don't need a regulator that bends to the whims of a government or to a private company because they have an economic stake in it, directly or indirectly. certainly it was a view that I expressed, that I had tremendous concern that the central government through BPL asked ERCA for an increase through a glide path in order to pay back a loan that it received, that it should not have received from government. To date, the loan has not been repaid, and the rate for electricity has gone up and not come down when predicted by the government. We still did not and have not gotten an explanation from ERCA on why it in fact authorized that. We want to guard against any government trying to bully a group of Bahamian professionals who would know how to make sensible, reasonable decisions without interference from government. Fourthly, we recommend that we establish a minimum time period for rate increases. Again, I don't like the 3-year review. I think it should be 5 years. But if there are extraordinary circumstances that forces a power company to ask for an increase, they may do so. 5, apply economic rates to all small businesses. Our view is that every small business, regardless of size, deserves access to fair electricity rates that support their growth and sustainability. 6, increase the VAT rebate on power bills. We'll come back to that. Except to say, they call us the bread basket people. We do believe that they should take VAT or bread basket items, baby products, healthy foods, medicines, all of these things, you should take it off. 7, we should mandate regular public engagements. I must tell you, the regulators are a little jittery about having in-person meetings. First of all, this is Grand Bahama, it's not, okay. So, but that aside, I didn't call the country or anything, I just said, so the bottom line is we have to engage our people so we can hear them and figuratively feel their pain. And so we're encouraging public engagements on a regular basis. We also recommend that we establish documented training regime for our regulatory staff. And we also recommend 9, review existing agreements and laws that govern the relationship between the regulator and the independent power producers. And finally, we recommend that we improve the protocols to address customer complaints. Many of you have had complaints that have not seen the light of day. I'm one of those customers. I have a complaint as well, and certainly we lodged it with the power company. And as soon as we have a definitive word that there will be no increase, I fully expect that they will address my issue. And so, again, I thought it important as a part of this presentation to address that elephant in the room, the relationship with GBPA and the power company. We believe the people of Grand Bahama deserve an energy system that works for them and not against them. That's affordable, so that input in their business costs does not become an albatross around their neck that bury their business. Electricity can no longer be the thing that people attribute the failure of their business to. And you should know that you have the ability to self-generate and sell back to the grid. So you should explore that with the power company so that you have an opportunity to reduce your costs and potentially earn money. And that is something that Rotary should in fact bring one of the persons in to specifically talk about that economic opportunity. Grand Bahama has had spurts of economic development. We remember under the Ingram administration when there was a series of major investments in Grand Bahama. The container port was one of those investments. We had a number of the industrial companies came in during that time. And so, again, we welcome those kinds of developments. But let's be honest, we have had a degree of stagnation, in part because of climatic events over the years, but in part because of a lack of either vision or manifestation of that vision by administrations and the Grand Bahama Port Authority. We are due for new life again. And so we are excited, those of us who are present here, members of the Free National Movement, we believe that there are opportunities on the horizon, and there's still a window for this administration. If it is prepared to work with all stakeholders, there are opportunities for us to jumpstart this economy again. One, we have to define what Grand Bahama is about. To what extent are we going to be allocating resources to continue to expand the industrial infrastructure and ecosystem? How is that going to coexist with tourism, and what type of tourism will it be? Certainly if it's going to be tourism, we have to get the hotel sold. And we had, after Dorian, we had about a year and a half to 2 shot at it. This administration, I think, has had 3 years at it, but I wouldn't make any comparison in terms of the timeline. It just seems like one is longer. And so, but we have to get the hotel sold. That is important. You need more rooms on the island. In addition, we have to get the airport, a world-class airport, done. We've had the good fortune of meeting a number of the persons who are involved in the process of building a world-class airport. We believe that the consortium, which has been reconfigured, when we left office, we left in place a short list. One of those groups have now reconfigured its membership so that it seems like everybody is happy, but yet we don't have the movement needed. Every day we take not to move ahead with the project, we amplify the amount of opportunities that we are squandering and missing. And so we encourage the government. We stand ready to be helpful to the government in order for us to move this process forward. And GBPA and DevCo, all of these companies have a role to play as well. They should be at the table. Because remember, had GBPA, had DevCo and its partner, Hutchison, fulfill their role, we would not be in the position that we're in today. All of us share some responsibility. FNM and PLP government, GBPA, DevCo, and both of its shareholders. So this is a time for all of us to sit together and discuss the way forward for our community. There is a need for us to invest more funds in small business development. I look around the room, I see a number of entrepreneurs, small, medium, and large businesses. When we were in the chair, we made $50 million available to small and medium-sized businesses with a special emphasis on small businesses. We believe that this administration ought to at least put that amount in, which we have not been able to find in successive budgets, but better still to double that amount. And that we invest in businesses whose profile and focus is consistent with what can work in Grand Bahama given the amount of people that live here. It doesn't make sense starting a business where there are 20, 30 other competitors and you don't have the critical mass to sustain it. It is possible to start businesses that can be started locally but operate internationally. There are Bahamians who are constantly on their phone. Many of them are in the room today as well. But you're employed. There are many Bahamians who are unemployed where their phone can become a work tool. Right. They can build websites, build Facebook pages, manage those pages. They can be involved in advertisement. We need our education system to align, again, with the opportunities or challenges that we face. So if we are having a deficit in construction workers, then we should spend more time reaching out to Brother Delancey to provide more funds for his tech center in order to train persons to deal with the needs that we have in the construction sector. We should better resource BTVI and UB to create the class of workers in order for us to meet the demand for labor. But on the technology front, those who have a phone, those who have a tablet, we need short courses, to train them in order for them to enter into vocations where they're able to make money on a consistent basis using the devices they have. But they need resources and help. And that's where small business development is important and funding from central government is important. When Kwesi Thompson was in the chair, we advertised widely for everybody who wants to apply for a grant. We need to bring that system back where everyone on the island, every member of parliament knew that the grant program was going on and was encouraged. The public knew. We need a non-partisan promotion of resources for all Bahamians to apply and to succeed. We also need to return to the studies that you have participated in. Many Rotarians were a part of the studies to determine what are the best industries that Grand Bahamians are interested in investing in. I don't know how many of you remember we did this exercise when we were in the chair, the Grand Bahama Port Authority with many different stakeholders. We identified several business areas that Grand Bahamians thought were important. Surprisingly, agriculture was high on that list, and it probably had to do with Dorian and COVID, where we were struggling. We now need to invest in those areas. Why isn't there a food pantry on Grand Bahama? This is something that we ought to establish. More acreage should be put under cultivation using new technology like green technology. We started the Agro Village, the building that was approved for Grand Bahama, I must confess, was being built in Marco City. I must also tell you that it's now being built in Saudi Lutra by the new Minister of Agriculture. So again, the bottom line is there's a need for new technologies in order to spur agricultural development. We are importing $1 billion worth of food. 1 billion with a B. And since the government has changed, we have not decreased that by 5%. No single item, protein or produce, you can find a decrease in imports by 5%. I really meant 4, 3, 2, 1. There is no product by 0.5% that we are now producing that we are importing. Successive governments have not hit the mark. And so agriculture holds a powerful opportunity. In the new technology in agriculture, you are able to go to work in the same suits that you have on in a temperature-controlled environment. So again, I know I've said a lot. I want to just wrap up and we can take up the rest of the issues in the question and answer period. But I just want to wrap up by saying there are opportunities in different sectors of our economy that we are not yet taking advantage of, and we ought to, as stakeholders, do so. And so I close only by saying the following. 1, we must reverse the population growth trend that we presently have. Grand Bahama's population has shrunk, and not sufficient of you are having babies. I'm included. There is a brain drain. Your children are going off to school and they're not coming home. Parents, I challenge you to invite your children to come back home. There will be no glass ceiling when I'm in charge. And they don't have to wear red every day. I'm just kidding. They don't have to wear red in order to have an opportunity. We will build a system that's merit-based. Secondly, as I close, it is important that we create housing that is affordable to Bahamians. And there are so many formulas on how to do it. There should be a housing revolution in Grand Bahama that invites Bahamians who are overseas to have a home, foreigners who wish to live in paradise to have a home, new professionals to have a home, whether blue or white collar. There is a way to create not so much affordable housing, but we could also do that with social housing, and there are multiple formulas to make that happen. And so I end there only by saying that we have a wonderful opportunity to do some transformative things in Grand Bahama. As we work on economic growth and development, let us also strengthen the social safety net. We have gotten an agreement. Kwesi and myself met with the Minister with Responsibility for Social Services. He reconfirmed today that they are going to make sure that those senior citizens that have been taken off the list to receive food assistance, while they are being verified, that he will reverse that decision. They will not be off the list. While they are sorting out that issue, persons will remain on the list. So he will correct that. And he appreciates that there are those of us who live here who understand this economy. And while we know Grand Bahamians would rather go it themselves, until that day, we need to make sure the social safety net is there. There is a need for us to strengthen the social safety net by helping parents who have special needs children, to ensure that those persons that are on the spectrum, those parents who have children with Down syndrome, that we have a facility, and I ask Rotarians to work with us so that we can help establish a facility in Grand Bahama and strengthen the existing school that we have in order for children with special needs to have a place, those that are at school age, and especially a daycare for those that are adults whose parents are handicapped in work because they have to stay home with their children. And finally, we need a halfway house, one that is substantial for women and for children who are escaping difficult, violent situations at home and have no place to stay. We have housed a number of them here at Castaways and other places. It is not sustainable at $100+ a night or even $75. We need to find a place, and this is something that Rotary can also contribute to. I stop there, and thank you for your time and attention. Yes.
Good afternoon, Honorable MP.
Thank you.
And yes, thank you so much for what you present here today and what you've laid out. I can see 2026 in your future. But with all of that being said, there was one critical aspect, and this is because of my personal case that wasn't presented for the island of Bahama. And this is free for you today.
Yes, thank you.
You developed Bahama in many ways in your presentation, but Bahama was not sold as a destination, as a health care city.
Yes.
Bahama right now does not have the means for any trauma, neurological, or neurological cases. So if someone is in a car accident and they have sustained brain injuries, if they cannot get it to the point where they can be controlled, they will die. That is a fact. I have a daughter who's had 2 brain surgeries, 3 open heart surgeries in her lifetime. Nothing can be done here. She can only be managed, pain managed. I am thinking, regardless of the government, healthcare is number 1. Bahama is minutes away from the U.S. People want a safe, healthy, quick place where they can get seek care. I think that's going to change the trajectory of the island as well as the economics, because we're going to have a different level of residents. You have the doctor, you have the specialist, you have the surgeons, you have their staff, you have their personal care persons who are going to come in with their families to take care of their kids. You have a different approach on school systems. You have data development. I think that we should start looking at Bahama from the point where we're looking for tourists to fill rooms and redevelop. Obviously, industry is not going to work for us anymore. So we need to now look at being a health care city where everything here, where we can deal with persons who come in for cancer treatment, for neurological issues, even for their plastic surgery. We need to have it here on the island of Bahama. You also mentioned about the critical mass. It is difficult. I've seen it. I've been here for the 25 years of my life. And in those 25 years, in those 25 years, I've seen Bahama boom, I've seen it plateau, and I've seen it totally drop. You've asked us to come home. Even the present government is asking us to bring people home. First of all, where they can work, where they can stay, and who they can stay with. Because we don't have any hotel rooms, so everybody's Airbnb it. So the cost to live on Bahama has escalated. So what are the plans? In addition to what you said, to get the critical mass back here. And Bahama Power Company, I know we know them, right? They prepared 50,000, only 20,000 out here, active. Everybody that gone. And if this storm comes, everybody else gone. So they will have to increase their rates on top of it because they have to go based on who is president, who's here conducting business on the island. So I just feel that Bahama House needs to come back, but we cannot continue at the approach that we've been taking of trying to recreate the real insanity. So we need to find a new approach in developing Bahama. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With respect to the issue you raised about healthcare, you know, both administrations, FNM as well as PLP, both talked about a plan to increase medical tourism. So we're certainly still committed to that. So I'd only say this: the fundamental difference between the approach that we have in mind and they have in mind is that in doing the audit of professionals that are available for our healthcare system, One of the things we discovered when we were in the chair, we had a shortage of nurses somewhere in the vicinity of 300 to 350. My understanding from their figures is closer to 400. And all of the allied health services, there are shortages. When the Beck group came in, I think Crazy Pete, if I'm not incorrect, a Bahamian is the principal, one of the principals in that group. And they did a study, they're being used by this administration as well. One of the recommendations was that we do not pursue a green field development. We don't go to a brand new site, but how do we expand the existing sites that we had? That is what led to some of the decisions made around accident and emergency, the critical care block in Providence, the expansion of the children's ward, et cetera, et cetera. Because we felt as if you allocate now another $200+ million to a facility in Nassau, another one in excess of $100 million here in Grand Bahama, your biggest challenge is, let's say hypothetically you're able to borrow enough money to do that. The question is, how are you going to provide the equipment, the medicine, and the personnel that you are unable right now to provide? We have a shortage of bags for blood at the ramp. Right now, there's a shortage. So you just need one major event to absorb what they presently have. We have a problem where we have theaters that are available for operation, but insufficient staff in order to use the theaters that we have. So a part of it is the approach, and so I agree with you. If we create a world-class, a series of world-class facilities, because there are private sector groups that have the ability to do it, we will save tens of millions that go out of the country every year. I guarantee you, without knowing everybody in the room, that no less than a quarter of the persons in the room do annual physicals in the United States. Cleveland, or Baptist, and the average procedure that they're doing, including some cases dental and eye, are being done in the U.S. So we are sending tens of millions of dollars out, and so our approach would be different. We think that we have to be careful how we are spreading ourselves so thin, because I haven't even mentioned the Family Island facilities. The second thing in terms of how to attract Bahamians back home, I won't unpack it all now, just to say that many persons in the diaspora can, even if they physically live overseas for the majority of the year, can spend several months here and establish a presence, a home, as well as a business. It's not uncommon, several Bahamians are doing it already. There are other countries in the region that are doing that regularly. And so we need to create a pathway where Bahamians see our opportunities in order to do business. And this is why we are big on transparency in our administration. When you have a select group of persons who are benefiting from the contracts in the Bahamas, as we have now, we are moving into, if I were to say it in the politically correct way, a bunch of oligopolies. But if I say it correctly, we are moving into a series of cartels. A select group of business persons who are dominating particular sectors, and the share offering they are giving to Bahamians does not allow you, if you have less than $40,000 or 50 or 60 or 100, to buy into these, even when they are privatizing Bahamian assets. So we need to say to young Bahamians in coming home, there's an opportunity for you. You will attract more Bahamians if they believe they have a fair shot of investing in BPL, and they don't have 50,000 yet, and they don't have 40,000. They would feel more confident that in much the way they can participate in the capital markets in the US, they can do the same here. We are not creating those opportunities. And so for us, we believe you should not do these deals unless all Bahamian, first of all, there should be competitive bidding, but secondly, all Bahamians should have an opportunity to invest. The other thing is, we should hire Bahamians. We had a program. We had a program where college graduates were hired. They were paid $30,000 at a minimum to come in. Some of them were funded to go off again to get additional qualifications, but they were we cannot have people coming over with advanced degrees and they can't find a job. We are hiring consultants who, to say they are slow, would be an understatement, who do not have the requisite skills to be in the positions that they're being in, and they're doing political work on government time, promoting the organization of their choice. And you have persons with degrees who are home, and their parents are reaching out and saying, you mean there's nothing for my child who has come home and willing to work? And so there are ways, I believe, we're able to attract Bahamians. We are giving companies to foreign groups, but we have Bahamians who are in the exact same field who are part of international companies. That's a pathway as well to welcome them back home. The Beck Group is but one example. Yes.
Good afternoon, fellow parents and guests. I listened to the presentation. One of the things as a Grand Bahamian and a Bahamian is how do we get government to move away from everything that government wants to do, is this large sum of borrowing to be able to build this and to do that. And all we're continuing to do is to create a bigger debt for the country. And we look at a lot of our natural resources, we look at a lot of new taxes added daily, but we don't see really where the money is going. And so how do, or I guess a question, how do you propose as 2026 to change that climate of this bulk of borrowing to be able to take the country forward and tap into what I believe we have the ability. I go back to a presentation by Vaughan Miller when we look at the billions of dollars on just one company in Grand Bahama over a 15-month period. And if we could get a portion of that just to go on the debt, we wouldn't have to do. And so I think for me, we want to see taxes go down and not taxes increase as they increase.
So just two things. One is public-private partnership. When Peter was in the chair, Peter Turnquest, one of the things we came up with was a policy on public-private partnerships. A private company comes to the table, they may bring management skills and money. The government may bring land or guaranteed contract. But there was a pathway for us to raise money from the private sector, but it had to go through, there was a formula. You had to compete. There was competitive bidding, so you couldn't just single source it. So if you're doing a road work, you give multiple people a chance. If you're building a bridge, dock, you allow a private company to come in, they're bringing the money, sometimes the management skills, and they compete. We would do PPPs different than this administration. They have single source. The majority of the big contracts, $100 million, $60 million contracts, they single source it to particular groups. We do not know what the interest rate is. We are hearing in some cases it could be 8%, it could be 12%. We know that for some of those projects they could go to IDB, or they could go to some other folks. Or if that same company was competing with somebody else, they may have lowered the interest rate for the government. But since the government is not competing, they go at the rate they go at. And so you could go to IDB and get 3%, 3.5%, maybe 4%. And so it can't be right that you are paying an additional 4, 5, 6% to someone where you can access the same funds elsewhere. Now, I'm partial to PPPs with Bahamian companies. That is, because I have no difficulty with Bahamian companies growing wealth if they are adding value to the country, but it has to be at an interest rate that makes sense for Bahamians. So we'll do that differently. The second thing is we should encourage more investment. We make it too difficult for people to invest, Bahamians and foreigners. And so we have to roll out the red carpet domestically as well as internationally. We have to move faster. We should, in our first advertisement of opportunities in the Bahamas or the investment policy, they should be able to go online and see A through Z. And not, people complain all the time about having to go back and forth for an extended period of time. Or one public servant, for example, let's just say hypothetically in one area, slowing down the process and nobody's able to intervene. And so we want to make sure that neither the policy maker or the public servant, either of them are slowing down the project. The final thing I'd say is the difference between us and them. Is it Kendrick Lamar? They're not like us. Oh, okay. So the difference is we do not believe that state-owned enterprises should continue to absorb so much of the public funds. One of the things our colleagues agreed on when we were in the chairs, that we should privatize all the parking houses. Every parking house in the Bahamas should go in private Bahamian hands to use as distribution centers that they run, or as food processing centers. The national slaughterhouse system should be in private hands, supervised by veterinarians to set the proper sanitary and phytosanitary standards. And we also believe the feed mill that the government keeps boasting about all the money they're spending, that should be in private hands, not theirs. And so, again, we support private investors driving the development of the economy versus government. We are facilitators. We shouldn't be in the business of running tons of programs. Others can do that more effectively and cost effectively than us. See Alan and that, gentlemen.
Yes, hi, I'm Alan Johnson. I just want to make 2 points that you touched on that are very important for us as business people, as residents. The first one is when you spoke concerning about the self-generation. I don't think most people in the room knows how powerful that statement is. And currently it's 150% of the current generation. But there is some things that one should become aware of, that if you were to generate your own power, including electricity for your ACs, including solar systems, that you could very well cut your light bill by 70%, and if you get an over generation capacity of 150%, it will set you at zero and pay for the solar system that you have in place. The second one that I think that is important for us to understand, and just for me to expand on, because I live in that environment, because we call them digital nomads. When we say digital nomads, we look for foreigners, but like you say, there's a lot of people walking around, not knowing where they are, not knowing where they're going, in a nomadic type environment within the Bahamas. And if we look at that potential for not only in what you said, but for the affiliate marketing and remote marketing, that's selling things you don't have to people you don't know for money you don't have. And so we can look and we imagine the economy, and some tweaking has to be done, and I'm going to mark my calendar for 2026 for those policy decisions and those small tweaking of the laws that's necessary to even expand it even greater. Thank you so much for your presentation.
We welcome your input, my brother. We'll go here and final question there. Oh, we'll end with you.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. And I know you're almost getting into political season. I just have one question, or two questions actually. First is, I know you talked about changing how it's done with the Port Authority and the government, so forth like that. If you had the opportunity to change how the hospital agreement is run, how would you change it to benefit economic growth and population here in Crown Bahama?
I begin by saying what provisions we have available right now that we can make adjustments. Within the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, we do have a provision that permits us to change the leadership in GBPA. We are not exploring that. So that's one of the things we will dedicate ourselves to in addressing. You would have heard myself and Kwesi Thompson talk about this often. So that's one of the things. The second thing is the whole issue around taxation of land. We believe that it's important that land is activated, that we are able to put it to productive use. We should not take any option off the table. That's as far as I'm prepared to go today, meaning that those that are holding 50,000+ acres must know that there's a perception among Grand Bahamians that there are those who are prepared to hold land generationally. They don't have a problem if the next generation develops it or the one that follows. Whereas there are the vast majority of us, we in go mode now, is go time. And we do not believe that having been given such a rare opportunity as almost half of the island to develop, that you have the luxury of adopting that mindset. And so, again, we had an opportunity when we were in government to address this issue. This administration has an opportunity to address the issue of determining how we will use the suasion of government to put pressure on those who are in charge in order to put the land to productive use. For us, we leave all options on the table. on amending the agreement to determine whether or not we are going to put any kinds of fees on land as an incentive for people to get it moving.
And secondly, thank you for your response. And secondly,
Sorry, Kwesi reminded, one of the things we talked about publicly is we need the licensees to be more intimately involved in the governance of the area. And when, for example, a property is sold, does any of us in here know when the port sees properties, for example, do we know whether or not persons are given a portion of what they have already invested? In other words, does the port get what it is owed, and what happens to the remainder of the equity and the value in that property? That is an issue that we believe ought to be looked at as well. Sorry.
Also, I just want to mention, I know in your presentation you mentioned, you stressed the importance of getting a world-class airport. Now, I may have different opinion there, but that's for different reasons. But however, how is it that you have airports in the Bahamas, around the Bahamas, I'm sure you've been around, where you have flights that come from around the world, Europe and so forth, go to Lucaya, go to HMOO, which are the second, third most air traffic. And the airport is the size of this restaurant right here, right now. So it has to be something different in terms of just not airports, airport in terms of appearance, structure, and so forth. I know most of it is political persuasion, but however, how is it that they have those concessions and now the airport, who is under now the government instead of the Port Authority, has the same taxation for incoming flights?
Right, so two things there. In terms of some of the family islands that you mentioned, some of those islands now are in fact experiencing some challenges in some of those flights continuing to go there. One is the condition of the airport has to be maintained. We seem to have a problem raising the capital in order to do that. In terms of Grand Bahama, I think one of the biggest issues we have with this particular airport is that we have a wonderful opportunity to bring in a number of companies that were coming along with this particular deal. The Manchester group was bringing with it a series of other groups. Amazon, there was a host of them were coming over on a site visit. They canceled their willingness to come over because they said there's no movement on the airport. The very thing they had entered into a tentative agreement with the Manchester group on, they said there's no movement on your airport. We are uncertain on whether this deal is going to happen. If it develops some steam, we are prepared to then come and look. So we have a chance, when I said a world-class airport, to create new businesses associated with the new airport that we would put in place. One of the things that I think an airport in that area will spur in the Bahamas and spur in Grand Bahama first is there's a need for us to protect whatever airport we put there. I do not agree with those who have a problem with us using natural resources to build a berm, even if it means us entering into relationships with international companies where they are doing some of that excavation along with Bahamian partners, as long as we know that we are benefiting from what comes out of the ground. So for me, the world-class airport is more than just a route through which, or a venue through which people come here. It's about what additional industries we can bring. We can do consolidation in the Bahamas. Why are we not able, in close proximity to the airport as we envisioned years ago, to create centers where you can consolidate products that are coming in, whether it's from the Far East, whether it's from Europe, whether it's from Africa, here in the Bahamas, for onward distribution to North America or South America. All of these can be associated businesses with a world-class airport or in close proximity to a world-class airport. There was a plan left in place, and I would again get the name, or Peter or Kwesi can comment on it. We left a comprehensive study in place on developing all of the airports throughout the Bahamas in order to accommodate international traffic and how to go about funding it. That was part of why we took all government land, put it in a special purpose vehicle to use that as a leverage for attracting public-private partnerships. So I think there's a formula that we have to better utilize to get partners to develop both family island airports, inclusive of Grand Bahama. Okay. Sorry, right here and then Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Pintard. Commendations to you on your very incisive and comprehensive presentation. We are all familiar with the song, very popular song, "We Are the World," which was recorded some years ago. That song attracted top entertainers from around the world, particularly the United States. And the idea was that they would come together, donate their time to produce this song for charity internationally. But there's one thing that happened. When they entered into the recording studio, there was a sign over the door that said, "Leave your egos at the door." The purpose of that was some of those top entertainers would not be given lead roles on the recording. For example, Harry Belafonte did not have a leading role in the recording. It was done by Quincy Jones, who was the director. My point is, we have spoken about a number of issues within the country, particularly one-stop shop. And many times we get frustrated because we have to go hither, and yon to get the information that we want when we have already given the information hither, and yon. This may sound like a ridiculous request, but why can't the various parties come together in unity and say, put their egos at the door, leave their egos at the door, and say, for the good of the people, for the good of the country, we're going to come together and focus on some core needs within the country. Like, for example, the one-stop shop. Because I know that 5 years is a very short period of time, or even 4 years and 4 months is a very short period of time for us, for the various governments to complete what their projects are. But why can we not come together, and not just the politicians, look within the country and get the great minds. We have some young Bahamians that are incredible. They have tremendous ideas. Just go and get them, no matter whether in the Bahamas or, we have some Rhodes scholars. Why can't we utilize them? Bring them together and say, we now have 3 or 4 big major projects that we now want to instill here in this country. I know we have a national development plan, but I'm speaking of something where in total we can come together and say, this is what we're going to do, and it doesn't matter which government or party is in power, it will continue.
I think you answered it yourself. I think the National Development Plan is what gives us an opportunity. We have already agreed, the government has agreed. We had a ministerial meeting. Their ministers are members in New Providence, and we had a discussion about identifying a few things that we could agree on, and let's incrementally try to get to the finish line. So that's something that I hold some degree of hope in. The second thing is more definitive. Examine how the member for Marco City treat all Bahamians in Marco City, compare how the member for Kidd Island deals with people in Kidd Island, Rumkey, and St. Salvador, and then you determine who is less tribalistic in their politics. And I say to you, imagine one of them taking the culture that they practice locally to the national level. Which one would you be more comfortable with? Sorry, final question. Or comment, sorry.
First, let me thank you, Ruby, for having you come and speak to us today. You did a wonderful job in outlining the vision for Grand Bahama and what it can be. I wanted to remind Past President Nika, we were at one point almost a healthcare city. And many of you of a certain age will remember the IAT Center, which was a cancer research center. And people came to Grand Bahama to receive that experimental therapy. And Johnson Court was built off of that. That's where they all live. So we've done this before. Sorry? Yeah, well, yeah. So it can be done, and hopefully Dr. Foster will start moving the ball back in that area. I just wanted to comment on a comment that Darren made, just to say this. The Bahamas has been hooked on debt for the last 51 years.
Wow.
And I say 51 years for a reason. He's been hooked on debt like a drug addict on crack. There's never been a good program, a good loan that has been offered to the government of the Bahamas that it has turned away from.
This is true.
And the truth of the matter is that multilateral agencies find problems to fund that you never knew existed. And because we as the minister want to do something significant, we take it. We run for it because we're a superstar.
It's a legacy project. Yeah.
And as a result of it, you end up with this massive debt that's now consuming the current budget. And it's a problem that is not going away, it's going to get bigger, and at some point, if we're not careful, it will consume us. Don't mind the current noise about the deficit reducing and all of that. That is very temporary. Once you have a shock or a downturn, it will be disaster. That's just the reality. The question I wanted to ask.
Let me ask you that.
Sorry, it's kind of piggybacking off of what James was asking me about. And I'll just tell us one story, sorry. I had FedEx a few years ago, well, 15, 20 years ago now. I had FedEx ready to come to the Bahamas, Federal Express, because they were looking for a processing center outside of the United States. Guy came from New York on a ghost shopping trip. He got to the airport on a private plane, went to the FBO, they harassed him, customs harassed him, and immigration challenged him on why he was here. He never left the airport. Turned around, got on the aircraft, went back to New York. Sent a note, y'all are not serious. That's the challenge that you talk about when you talk about customer service up and down. My question though is about the airport, and you might have answered this question, and we may have a little bit of a difficulty, differences that we'll have to reconcile at some point. I do not believe that people come to a destination for an airport. In other words, I do not personally believe we need a $250 million airport. Because a $250 million airport, somebody has to pay for it.
Yeah.
And the way you pay for that is in taxes. I believe that the current facility that is at the airport today is sufficient to last us for at least the next 5 years as we rebuild the tourism plant here in Grand Bahama. After 5 years, we'll see what happens. We cannot panic over a once-in-a-generation climatic event. Yes, it may happen again, but we can't panic. We have to use our brains and plan for it. So the question I have is, ought we be looking at a more holistic approach to this airport and what it means for getting people through it efficiently and to their destination? And the same is true throughout the Family Islands. We don't need 2 million, 5 million, 3 million terminals. We need basic infrastructure to keep people dry, comfortable in the heat, or dry when it's raining. That's all we need. People to move through efficiently. $2 million is more than enough for most facilities on most islands. That's what you're talking about.
One thing I would say is that any money that I have, I'm willing to allow you to manage it, because I never say it, but for those of you who don't know, we had a nickname for former Minister of Finance. It was Titus. He is going to make sure that you constrain your spending. I partially agree in terms of the level of investment, but just to put in all of what is required in the pre-clearance, that's going to cost you some additional money. If you have multiple airlines right now in the airport that we have, people will get wet because they're queuing up outside right now. This is in Grand Bahama. So I do agree, 250 million. You remember the Prime Minister started out at 400 million, and then he kept shrinking until they got down to 100 and something, which we thought you could get to the finish line with. So I do believe that you want to create an airport that's iconic, because it's a part of you creating an iconic destination, but that is only as an attachment to you envisioning what Grand Bahama is going to be about. And so it shouldn't happen in a vacuum. It should happen alongside what your vision is for the tourism product in Grand Bahama. But I do believe the Sea Air Business Center that we had envisioned before, spaces for consolidation, for the big players who the Majesty Group had entered into discussion with, there's a room for them, I think, in Grand Bahama. And we should attract them if they want to set up here on the doorstep of the U.S. or the gateway to the rest of the Caribbean, and I think we should explore it. But yes, thank you.
Honorable Michael Pintard, I must say you're a courageous man. Why I say that is the Bahamas is a complex place to manage, and you seek to manage the Bahamas in the very near future. So I commend you for that. Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition and Member of Parliament for Marco City, on behalf of our President, the Governor, we would like to present you with this certificate. Thank you for sharing your words of wisdom and giving us some hope as to the future of Grand Bahama. On this day, which is the 8th of October, I'm sure what you imparted to us will stay with us, and we look forward to what you are about to do in the future. Thank you very much. And we also have
Can we get the club's involvement in the REACH project, a building for REACH? Sorry, say it louder.
Tell us when you come back.
September 17th, 2026.
I see our sergeant.